Poverty and Homelessness Board's executive meeting. We have a rather easy agenda today. We also have several people who have to leave a little bit earlier. So let's hop in real quick. I'd like to do a quick introduction. So if we could please have the electeds in the room, please say your jurisdiction and your name. Starting with Commissioner Farr.
Pat Farr, North Eugene County Commissioner.
Lucy Venice, Mayor of Eugene.
Lori Trigger, Lane County Commissioner, Position 3, South Eugene.
Court Rowley, Counselor in Springfield.
Awesome. Can we please have the providers in the room for the Poverty and Homelessness Board's Executive Committee membership identify themselves?
In the chat.
Spoken or go ahead, Noreen.
Noreen Donald's President United Way of Lane County. Good to see everybody, or see some of you.
Excellent. I am also a member of the executive board. I am representing Libertarians, and I'm the chair. Are there any other staff in the room that would like to introduce themselves? And then we do quick, and then we'll get into the meeting.
I'm Steve Manella, manager for Lane County.
Alex Dreer, Lane County staff.
Thanks, Steve.
And we have some people introducing themselves in the chat. Dan Bryant, Square One Villages. Lisa Stewart, Lane County staff. Michelle Hanks, Shelter Care. And Heather Saliki, Whitebird Clinic.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex.
Chair McAllister.
Welcome, everybody. We have next on our agenda the approval for, yes, sir.
Just very quickly, just a reminder to everybody that Lane County. Thank you. Just a reminder to everybody that this meeting is broadcast live on Metro TV, and it will be rebroadcast several times beyond the initial meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. With that in mind, we are recorded on both chat and on TV. So thank you, Metro TV, for your work with that. With that in mind, can we please look at the January 21st, 2021 minutes, and if there's no corrections, get a move to approve?
So moved. This is Noreen.
I'll second it. Lucy?
Second. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I'm sorry, I appear to be having some technical difficulties. I'm not hearing anybody.
Can you hear me, Chris? This is Noreen.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think we're ready for a vote, though.
I think I'm not alone in that I'm very sporadically hearing the chair. The vice chair could step in and perhaps fill in the blanks.
Yes, I will do that. And Chris, when we hear Chris again, we'll let him take control of the meeting. So we have a first motion and a second. All those in favor signify with thumbs up. That would be great, or thumbs down, actually.
Aye.
Aye. Looks like the motion carries. So the minutes, the consent agenda are.
Appreciate that.
Go ahead, Steve, Chris. Okay, I think I'll just step in because well, I know there are a number of people that have to leave and okay, so I've just seen a message from Chris. We will proceed on to the membership application. And I'm not sure who's presenting that, Steve. So it's the two potential members that have been advanced. Oh, Alex, go ahead for new membership to PHB. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. Well, Chris was going to present this, but I will until he regains sound. So we have received 2 new applications for membership. One of them is Sheila Wegner. She's the new DHS District 5 manager. District 5 includes Lane County. As you may recall, John Radich has served in that position for many years, and John Radich retired and then still served in that position until someone was hired. So now Sheila Wegner has been hired and applied, and her application should have been in your packet. And then the other person who has applied is Matthias Smith, a youth homeless representative. Matthias has applied for this position, and as you know, we've had difficulty recruiting for this position, in particular because of our meeting times, that they're difficult for people who work or youth who go to school. Matthias Smith is a member of the 15th Night Youth Action Council. He's actually been the Poverty and Homelessness Board liaison to the 15th Night Youth Action Council for over a year, and he is an active member of the Youth Homeless Solutions Work Group. He has attended almost every single meeting. We would need motions to approve these 2 members, and if you have questions about them, let me know.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion to approve both Sheila Wegner and Matthias Smith for membership on the Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Aye.
Okay, need a motion to move them forward.
I so move. To
Thank
appoint-
you, Mayor.
I'll second.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. All those in favor signify by either saying aye or put your thumb up.
Aye.
Aye.
And I probably should have asked for more, protocol here. Should have asked for more discussion. Is there any other discussion? Sort of doing this backwards.
This is not discussion to the motion, if I could, Noreen.
Please do.
But I just would like to offer in looking through Matthias's application and this ongoing challenge of having certain populations represented because of our meeting structure and our meeting time. Sort of put a pin in for future, and I know this body has talked about this before, but I think attending to that a little bit and maybe polling people who previously or currently serve about their ideas for solutions to how we could be a more accessible committee for their involvement and input.
Great point, really important point. Other questions or discussion? Steve, it looked like you wanted to jump in and.
Yeah, please disregard my comment. I was trying to message chat somebody and it went to everyone. Okay.
Any other comments? So duly noted, Commissioner Traeger, in terms of considering what's the appropriate time, what makes some sense, reevaluating time so that we can have better inclusion of people's voices. In particular, I know the challenge with Matthias's past experience, the timing was a little bit challenging for him. So, but are we good to move forward? We had a motion second, and I think we made an approval, sort of doing this backwards. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, we will move to the next agenda item, which is.
Can I be heard?
Oh, Chris, yes. Go ahead. You ready, Chris? Okay, well, we're going to move to agenda item 4, which is system performance measures. And Lisa Stewart, could you provide an update on the performance measures?
Lisa has requested that this item be moved to the all-member meeting, so there's more time to discuss it.
Okay, great, thank you. How about agenda item 5, communicating the work of PHB? I'm not sure who is on board for that discussion or conversation.
That is the chair. Perhaps we can move on to the next agenda item until we have Chris's audio back.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Alex. Okay, how about discussion of the strategic plan? You know, we had a strategic planning process from 2016 to 2021, where we've been talking about teeing up for another strategic plan. A few of us had a conversation, the scope of work, and I'm not sure. Not sure. There's a lot of feedback. I'm not sure whose that is. So there is a draft scope of work that I think was in everyone's agenda packet that was sent out. And then there was a group of us that met on Tuesday evening just to have a deeper conversation about that in terms of what is it that we really want to accomplish and how should we proceed. And so I'm not sure, Alex, if you were planning to show the strategic planning, the draft document, the scope of work.
I can show that if you would like on the
I
screen.
think so. I think it's helpful for folks if they haven't had a chance to look at it or if they have questions. So please do.
So here's the draft scope of work, and just some background on this. The Poverty and Homelessness Board creates a 5-year strategic plan that's required, as it's a continuum of care board and a community action agency board. And our current strategic plan goes through this year, so we need help to create a new strategic plan for the next 5 years. Last time we hired a consultant so that they could be a neutral party to help facilitate this process. And that is the thought process, again, is to hire a consultant who can facilitate this discussion and help us create a strategic plan. So this is the scope of work, and it's a draft just to be published in order for us to recruit a consultant. So this would be the public request for quotes for people who would want to apply to be our consultant. So there's information about the Poverty and Homelessness Board, the project overview. This has been developed based on the last executive committee discussion on this, as well as the meeting that was held earlier this week reviewing this draft. So what I have heard from members as far as put in the scope of work is that number one, we want to focus on the fundamental design of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, including the administrative federal requirements of the Hearth Act that make this board the Community Action Agency Board and the Continuum of Care Board. So there are specific requirements from HUD regarding what this board needs to look like, as well as a community action agency. So we want to make sure a consultant takes those into account, and also recommends if there are any changes that should be made to the form and function of the PHB, given these federal responsibilities. Another thing that the executive committee mentioned in their last meeting is that the strategic plan should elevate existing plans. So it should coordinate with the homeless service system improvements or the TAC report recommendations, the work of Sarai Johnson, the joint housing and shelter strategist, coordinate with other relevant housing and systemic change plans for Lane County, City of Eugene, City of Springfield. Those cities have their own plans, and we want to make sure we are enhancing those but not duplicating. And we want to build on the successes of the last strategic plan, identify gaps, things we didn't complete in the last strategic plan, and also include the work of our subcommittees, as that's where a lot of our work goes. And I'm going to just go through some of these other things pretty quickly. But it was pretty clear that we would like a consultant to analyze existing power structures that systematically disadvantage people of color, and identify recommendations for the Poverty and Homelessness Board to be more equitable in membership and more accessible to the community, as well as clarify roles of the members. And here are some other plans we would want the consultant to be familiar with. The consultant should work with existing stakeholders. And then we have added, based on the meeting this week, preference points were added. I'm sorry for scrolling quickly. I know that's really difficult to read. I'm just going to go down. Preference points were added to the scoring for consultants who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, as well as Lane County residents. It was pretty clear from many discussions we would prefer someone from Lane County who's familiar with the issues in our community. So applicants would get preference for those things. So I'd like to hear any other recommendations for changes to this. Ideally we can get the quote posted soon, but if you're not ready to approve this to be posted, we can still work on it.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate your walking through it. I think there were a couple of important considerations that the group that met on the Tuesday night really wanted to make sure. Thank you for including those. I think I should know this, but what is the timeline? Once we get it posted, are we thinking the work would begin July 1, or is there really that kind of a timeline that we have to consider?
Actually, that is not yet nailed down.
Okay.
That's something we should think about. How long do we want to give this person?
Right. I would love to hear from others, especially those who joined the conversation on Tuesday. Any other, I think one of the things we talked about is not a rinse and repeat necessarily, but that we really wanted to, I think Alex has captured the considerations, but that we really want to understand how can we be more action oriented and what does that mean? And that might even just flow right into the conversation of the governance for the future. But I just think that we had a really robust conversation, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I know a couple of us, Lucy, you had some really important things, considerations and comments about the next strategic plan.
Yeah, thank you, Noreen. Thank you. And so I appreciate, Alex, I think you really did capture the essence of what we talked about. I have a particular concern that the HUD requirements and the continuum of care don't sort of include, in the most robust way, the homeless campers who are living in our parks and public spaces. Like, they're not really embraced in this process. They're sort of embraced in the TAC report, but there's a big challenge that we face on our streets. And so I guess you sort of addressed this on the form and function, but there's a way in which I think in the form and function, part of that discussion is the extent to which we sort of expand the scope in a way so that we're really embracing those folks who, they're not being addressed by permanent supportive housing because they're way farther down the line in terms of their need for services. And it is a conversation with the shelter stakeholder group. So just kind of wanting to make sure that when we look at this, we're recognizing that HUD dollars, or I don't know the extent to which HUD dollars are really available for people who are still camping on streets and would provide support for outreach. But I don't know that the Poverty and Homelessness Board should be restricted only to what HUD dollars will fund.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I jump in and then Commissioner Farr.
Oh, sorry. If he's in line too, I apologize.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead first. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. I'll pile on. Alex, I thought Alex did an amazing job of capturing the spirit of that conversation, which was very expansive and contained a lot. So that was, I feel like, a miracle. You're amazing. Congratulations for being so awesome. And just to echo, I think what Mayor Venus said, I feel like one of the most important things for us to acknowledge is the changing landscape of what homelessness looks like in our communities. We do have some really good things to work on, of course, through the TAC report and those 10 recommendations that really a lot speak to the system side. I'm sure that we have some real tinkering to do on the number of shelter beds and the number of PSH units and other types of affordable housing that we need. But I do think that we're in a moment where we have opportunity to take a look at how this board is a crucial piece and a critical part of the function of making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring in Lane County and the city of Eugene, including things like including more rural representation of our communities outside of the area, and really taking this beyond just only focusing on the city of Eugene and kind of putting almost everything there, and rather supporting people where they are and where they choose to live, as well as dealing with this true crisis of unsheltered homelessness in our community as well. So there are a lot of dots to connect and a lot of concurrent moving parts and pieces, but I do think that this board's work is going to be really critical to making all of those things come together.
Thanks, Sarai. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Vice Chair. The current strategic plan has achieved a great deal, and that is documented in the living document and the plan document itself on Lane County's website. That being said, Noreen, you said we don't want to rinse and repeat. Clearly not. However, a strategic plan does take into account the underway items from the previous strategic plan, the tactics that are involved. I really support bringing in a facilitator to help us to rework what is going to be a very, very important plan, because we do have new information, new documentation, new staff, and really a new horizon for the Poverty and Homelessness Board. We are the Continuum of Care Board. We are the Community Action Agency. Both are statutory, and we're required to do that. But beyond that, as Mayor Venus just pointed out, we have needs in our community that this board is probably the best place for it to be addressed because of the multi-jurisdictional nature of the involvement, and because of the broad membership, which involves, well, you see the membership as people with lived experience, including our chair, and people who are service providers. This is the best place to do many of the things that we have to do. I firmly believe that. I believe the staff is in place. I believe the members are in place. And I believe the new strategic plan, while embracing and continuing the 2016-2021 plan, there are a lot of new things on there that we can really begin to address through the main body of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, but also, as Chair McAllister points out regularly, through its committee work. So I'm excited about this. I think the work is in front of us. It's clear as a bell to me. And when I say it's clear as a bell, what I mean to say is that the future is so muddy. That's clear as a bell. So we're charged to take care of that. So thank you, Chair, and I'm looking forward to this work. Thank you, Alex, for your.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Farr. I think, we part of what we talked about are the constraints with the reporting structure and there are restrictions there, and how can we flex this a little bit so we're really thinking about all who are unhoused. So that, I think that was part of the conversation on Tuesday. And I'm seeing Chair Chris. Are you want to step back in, Chris? Do you feel like you have the internet connection to do so?
Here's hoping. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I initiated a vote and realized that I was the only one talking, and so I felt I had to go to a different connection space. So thank you for your grace and your stepping in, Noreen. Thank you for everybody's comments so far. I wanted to just reiterate kind of what Sarai was talking about, how we need to just get people involved and and really work towards things that haven't necessarily been addressed in the past. I wanted to also point out that one of the recommendations for the consultant is that we have someone who has a local experience. And so there's a weighted consideration for that. So we need people to come up with ideas that's based off of what the local needs are. Our people tell us what they need. Our community and providers tell us what they're working with. And we need to build our strategic plans with the communities and the providers and the unhoused giving contributions to what will get them to that next plateau. And so I've been excited ever since the very first strategic plan meeting that I came to, which was after it was adopted, after this process that we're talking about now happened. And so we have a lot of pieces that are still on the table. We have some great strengths, but we can build off of that. And so while I think that we need to have some updates and some refreshing and maybe some redirection, I think that there's a lot that's in the previous plan, the advocacy piece, the support of services for people in shelter and the emergency shelter, that it's low barrier. And by low barrier, it does not mean no barrier, but it also means a coordinated and targeted effect. We don't want to warehouse people. We don't want to put people in boxes and then tell them to get better. We want to be there with them every step of the way as a community. And as they move from the street to supportive housing to self-independent living, that's where our community and our plan needs to be supporting, in my opinion. And so I'm very hopeful and supportive of the work that HSD has been doing and Sarai and our community partners as we try to get through this together. So I hope that with those filters that we look at this strategic plan and this opportunity to map out our next 5 years and build up. We got the fires, we got COVID, and we have chronic homelessness. Those three things alone are daunting. And we're doing it all together because we like to run that way. So was there anybody else who would like to speak from the executive committee on this topic? Mayor Venice.
Yeah, yes, I just wanted to add one thing, which, is really maybe for the larger board, but I'll just put it out here because I talked about this in our smaller meeting on Tuesday and wanted to share it with everyone else, which is that I do think that, and I've said this to this body before, that, on any given night, we have over 2,000 people who are living unsheltered on our streets. And practically over the next 12 months, a 75-bed permanent shelter is not on schedule to open. And we actually need to be able to extend services to people where they are. And I think an acknowledgement of that we want to be able to move people along would feed into how are we advocating and what are we advocating for? And because it's very different to be advocating for this sort of services, the outreach service and the coordination with all of the providers who are the ones that are well established, the ones that are relatively new, better coordination with all of those providers to deliver better services to people where they are will enable everyone to be safer and will eventually integrate well with the other recommendations in the TAC report. But it is in my mind a separate body of work for us and a kind of a separate funding strategy, because I don't know what HUD funding would be available for that kind of outreach services. And it's an advocacy piece and could be a legislative advocacy piece. So in our strategic plan, I feel very strongly that has to be reflected.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Steve, are there any thoughts that you'd like to share regarding the strategic plan and the process behind it?
No, I think that the work group that met on Tuesday and the work that that Alex has done to represent it is great. I think that one of the things that we'll have to do is we'll need to look at the scope, and it seems like the board is interested in a broader scope. So we can have some discussion about how to do that, because I think, as was mentioned, there's sort of concurrent planning needs both for the Poverty and Homelessness Board and for some of the work that the local jurisdictions are doing. So we can have discussions, if we need to seek additional funding for a larger scope on this. And I just wanted to mention to Mayor Venice's comments that we are, that the city of Eugene and Lane County have additional funding that is being put in place for additional outreach work, that it does come from HUD and does have the flexibility. But again, I think it's going to be important to look at the fact that, much of our funding is COVID related. We have some opportunities coming up with the American Rescue Plan, but there's a longer term piece to this within the 22 to 2027 range. And then the question of timing on this, I think our plan runs out at the end of 2021. And it'll probably take a little bit to secure a consultant. So, Alex and I haven't discussed this, but I'm thinking that, we want to be able to bring this plan in, by before the end of the calendar year, and probably the funding for it, we probably could get started before the end of this fiscal year, but most likely a lot of the work won't begin until July. So those are my comments. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, sir. It's 12:34. We are unable to make a movement on this item due to some further edits that have been recommended by staff. And so I just want to make sure we had the opportunity to discuss this and then move forward. So Alex, will you please bring this back to us when we need to either move it forward to the bigger board or do more work on it?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, ma'am. Also, just a point of clarity, I understand that we had some, and my notes are missing because I was gone for a minute, but we have to replace our CCO seats under membership. And so both, I believe, Trillium and Pacific Source have had people who are no longer with their organizations in that seat. And so I think that we'll be reaching out to make sure that we have representation of both CCOs moving forward. And so if there's any clarity we need to do on that, I ask Alex to let us know about that now before moving on to the communicating the work of the PHB.
Yes, so we received notice that Brian Lang is no longer with Pacific Source. And it sounds like our Trillium representative is no longer there as well.
Amanda Cobb, yes.
Oh, I did not know that. So,
too.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either. I knew that, that Brian Lang had left. I think it was the 5th of the month. So it may be a month or two before there are people in those seats. Just given the time frame for hiring and all that. So it may be 2 months before we actually have those seats represented again.
May I ask if, because the CCOs are still continuing to be involved in attending other smaller meetings, do we ask the organizations to provide someone to fill in that seat, or at least be there as to receive information, or do we just hold off on anything regarding these seats until they reach out to us and say they have those seats filled?
No, I think we can go ahead and contact both of them. I know that I was contacted by the CEO of Trillium, and I think that probably both CCOs are ready to make recommendations on folks to be liaisons with the Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Chair McAllister, I should declare a potential conflict of interest. My wife does work for Trillium, one of the CCOs. I do not perceive an actual conflict of interest in this conversation, so I will continue as part of the conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner. So it sounds like staff has something to work on in regards to those seats. And Steve, would you just check back with us once you find out something and if there's anything we need to do?
Yes, I'll make sure I coordinate that with Alex as well.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. So thank you for that. Now that we have all of our membership stuff wrapped up, we can move on to the fun stuff. Let's talk about communicating the work of the PHB. We have for this item 10 minutes. Essentially, what I wanted to ask this body is, how do you see us being received in the community with the work we do, with the strategic plan, with our projects, and how do we help articulate the work that this body is doing? A lot of people get us confused with the HSC. A lot of people get us confused with the Human Rights Commission's homeless work group. And a lot of us get us confused with just some advisory board that they have never heard about. And so I would like to, as we've talked about in the past, have some kind of mechanism where we work through the county, we work through the city options, where we show how this partnership, how this advisory role, and how the community engagement are happening. What was the Poverty and Homelessness Board's role with the comments? What is the TAC report, and why does it matter to this board moving forward? People have been around asking since we made our debut of the TAC report recommendations. They're still not sure what's going on. And so I think that we can educate and share while also supporting what we're trying to move forward. So that was the premise behind having this conversation. How do we reach out to people? I open it to members of this committee for discussion. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. A couple of us are charter members of the committee, so we've seen the entire iteration of and the evolution of the committee. I've always contended, and I've always believed from the start, that this is because of the membership of this committee, not any one individual, but because of the slots of membership in this committee, it's a dream team for recommending policy to the cities and to the county. And I think if we move forward with that in mind, it should be relatively easy for us each to convey the information that we develop in the board itself, if we have a consistent message. Now, one thing that I've thought about is that our local newspaper, the Register Guard, doesn't have the same kind of editorial coverage that it used to have. I say that with my tongue firmly embedded in my cheek. And because of that, we don't have that same venue that we used to have pretty regular access to. And, I mean, Noreen, you've been published there. Lucy, you've been published there. I've been published there a number of times. Corey, you've been published there in the past. And so I think that one part of it could be an outreach to them to ask if we could have a regularly scheduled monthly column in their editorial board. There are writers who do have that regularly scheduled monthly column. That being the case, it could be a co-authorship of one or two or three or four members of the committee. So a lot of things that we can do. I think as long as we're working in concert and we all understand that this is a pretty significant board that we're sitting on with pretty significant potential impact in the community. I think we can really, we're receiving the pitch and we've got the bat in hand. It's time to hit the ball. And Noreen, I know you've got a lot to say about this.
I don't know if I have a lot to say about it, but I do have a couple of things to say, and I had an opportunity to meet with Steve Murkahiski since he serves on the United Way board. And I mentioned this Tuesday when our group got together because I do think it's critical. Every single day, I get questions about our unhoused community from various perspectives. And, people just don't understand the things that are happening. Of course, we have so much more to do. So, Steve, for the last several months, and I also think that Mayor Venus and Mayor Van Gordon have a bully pulpit too. But my suggestion to Steve was to sort of consider this daily, 4 days a week now, email that he sends out to partners across the county that he include, as COVID winds down and vaccinations are up and we've got some positive news in the community, to take a section of that particular email and just highlight 2 to 3 things that are happening because we send it out to our staff. I send it out to our board. I think there's an opportunity for those who have bully pulpits, just to share what is happening, those partnerships, whether it's the MLK project or any of the many other things that are in the process but not to enamor the situation that, oh, we're doing all these things, but here are some positive things that are happening. And we know we have a lot more to do. But I just think that if we could figure out how to, and it needs to be more channels, Pat. I think, you know, the Register Guard days are sort of over, given who's reading it and how much we're reading it. I mean, we need to think about all the multiple ways in channels to communicate what the need is, what's going on, and how we're attempting to address some of these really pervasive issues. So that's just my thought on it. And I'll be quiet.
I hope that you're never quiet, Noreen. I appreciate your voice and your words. With that, Mayor Venice, may I make a statement and then call on you? Thank you, ma'am. I just wanted to say that the Register Guard, while it is what it is, Tatiana, one of the writers, has been covering a lot of the homeless works and staying on top of that. Eugene Weekly has also started to cover some of our unhoused situations and considerations, including doing obituaries for unhoused folks who fall this year. We've had 2 that I know of, including both of those who were recognized at the last Aberdeen Homeless Board meeting. With that in mind, we also have the Chronicle. The Chronicle is watching and seeing what's happening in rural Lane County and in Springfield as well. So we have opportunities to engage in a meaningful manner. We also have a lot of local radio that is underutilized, in my opinion. So I yield on that portion just so it can share the voice. Mayor Venice, please.
Yeah, I appreciate those reminders, Chris, that we actually, we do have some, that there, I think the Register Guard, they've got some new reporters there who actually do a good job, and they give them some acreage in the newspaper to cover things in a little more in depth. So we don't get the sort of quick daily turnaround, but they've written some good, deeper explorations. And so I don't think we should ignore that it is a good vehicle there for deeper coverage. I have mentioned this at the city of Eugene level. Through COVID, the cities of Eugene and Springfield and the county had very regular press conferences. We had one this morning. And I do, the press conferences, they can be live cast on social media. They do get picked up. They get picked up by TV and radio, as well as newspapers. It's a question and answer. I do think that this body could consider on a more regular basis kind of doing a press conference in a similar way to the way we've done COVID, where there's a reminder of what the stats are, reminder of what work we're doing, at whatever request or information we feel the public needs to know about something. I think it's a pretty strong coordination. And, I don't know, in the beginning of COVID, this time last year, we were having those every week. I wouldn't suggest so frequently, but once a month, maybe once every 2 months, but we really could sort of coordinate our message. It's because it's a fast changing landscape. And I will just say, I know the county commissioners feel this too. My mailbox is packed, and it's packed every day because we have campsites now we have a very big campsite on Chambers at 13th, and the neighborhood is done. They are done. And we probably have 60 or 75 tents there, and we're mobilizing to address that, but the neighborhood is done. And if this community is going to come around and help us address homelessness, we cannot be like burdening specific neighborhoods with something that's just untenable and feels very unsafe. So I think a broader communication strategy can help us as long as there's action that comes with it. So.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor Venice, for that. You're exactly right that certain areas are being burdened. I believe that, and I'll say this once again, if we all who are members of this board have a consistent same message, then they're hearing it from everyone is hearing it from multiple points. A monthly press conference, absolutely. A monthly column, absolutely. But those will only work if we're all on the same page. And I think it's important that each member of this committee, we have a central messaging point that we all get first. And then when we're presenting the message through the entire county, including the metropolitan area and the smaller cities, that we're all saying the same thing. And they hear it over and over again. It's like, it's 9 o'clock, it's time to put your pajamas on. Tomorrow it's 9 o'clock, it's time to put your pajamas on. Pretty soon the kids remember that. Now, I'm not equating the general public to kids, but I'm equating that message, the consistency of messaging being so important to making certain that people hear the message. Because, quite often, if the mayor of Eugene and the mayor of Springfield and the mayor of Oak Ridge are saying different things about the approach to the homelessness situation or the poverty situation in their communities, then you have three messages that are kind of convoluted a little bit. If we're all saying the same thing, then once again, it's driven home and people hear it. The membership of this committee is very powerful in its policy reach, very, very powerful indeed. And we've not just barely flexed our muscles.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Councillor Rodley said, would it make sense to develop a communication plan as part of the strategic planning? Councillor Rodley, in the past, we've talked about trying to develop with the county a way to help articulate this. We spoke a couple meetings ago a little bit about what they've currently been doing and how they look at a process in terms of developing a said plan. And so I believe that we were going to look down the road to maybe put together a team like we had done at a previous effort to try and make that happen. I would love to run it by a consultant, should we secure a consultant, about how they see a communication plan highlighting and working on things. We got to experiment a little bit with it with the TAC report, both advertising what was happening, advertising as it was coming through, and then like speaking to the talking points afterwards and how it went. And I know that our HSD staff, such as Alex Dreer, help take that data and put it in chunks that our community can not only visualize, but also share. And so I do think it's a very important piece. But while I have the mic, can I ask if the city of Springfield wants to say anything in regards to communication?
Nothing like putting me on the spot, Chris, and then I get in trouble if I say anything that Mayor Van Gordon isn't for. As I'm hearing you talk about it, I think it might make sense to actually, whether it's a subcommittee or to actually figure out what it is that you want to say and create a plan. And by you, I mean we, and some places, and maybe there's some prioritizing. As Mayor Minna says, if it's some prioritizing around communications around the unhoused and what that looks like in our neighborhoods, then that could be a different plan than if it's around the development of some affordable housing or things like that. So it's just maybe thinking about just narrowing in from of wanting to communicate about the work that you do and the work that this board does to what's the purpose and what are the priorities of that messaging is all I'm thinking about. So that was my neutral, non-Springfield response.
Thank you, Councillor. Sounds like we got some stuff to maybe talk about a little bit more, work with staff on. I think that as we start to iron out our strategic plan and maybe even evaluate where we were with our last strategic plan, that might be a piece that we can communicate. What did we do well in the last 5 years that actually was planned, started, and finished? What's in the yellow zone? And what's something that we still want to launch? So these are ways that we can kind of get ahead of the negative media. We know that putting people in large groups with the little services are going out and collecting information but not having places for people to be, or setting all this stuff up but not having access to services to support people to getting through it. These are all these barriers that we meet at different levels of engagement. And so if we can show the positive traction, not just patting ourselves on the back, but saying, this is the real deep inroads that we're doing. This takes time and we need to do this together. If we can somehow articulate that message as the PHB through our rippling organizations, through our rippling jurisdictions, and also giving voice to the communities that feel like they haven't been heard. It's not about just hearing their words, but it's hearing their truth and trying to develop goals and interventions with those truths, whether it's Springfield homeless, Oak Ridge homeless, Cottage Grove homeless, or Eugene's downtown. We know that people are homeless for different ways and different needs. And how are we using these COVID dollars, these federal dollars, and these state dollars, in addition to our own community investments, to make this go away, or to at least prove it for a better day? So that's what I really want to press as the chair of this committee. If we are talking about communication, that we're not just data dumping, that we're not just talking about what we have done, but where are we going? How can we map it as a community so everybody has buy-in? I yield. Anybody else want to say something? Okay, Noreen? Okay.
Thanks. I think we've kind of captured it. I think the consistency. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Farr. I'm going to need to jump anyway to another meeting. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Bye. Commissioner Farr, were you going to say something?
No, Chris, sorry, I lost my signal for a moment. I was trying to get it back.
Oh, gotcha. Well, thank you very much for that. Alex, can we please see the agenda again? Thank you. I feel like we've spoken on the strategic plan work. We've talked about the communication plan. Was Lisa Stewart able to give her system performance measures?
She asked that be moved to the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Steve, were you going to say something?
Alex covered it.
Thank you, sir. So let's, if this body agrees, let's look at the governance charter information. Alex, are you presenting on this?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I can't unmute myself and open a document at the same time.
I think we're all working on that skill set.
Okay, so the proposed updates to the governance charter were in your packet. I apologize for the scrolling. I'm just gonna go to the two items that are proposed changes.
We're looking currently at the strategic plan. Alex, not the charter.
Yes, I am. This is the wrong document. Thank you.
So this is a very important document, and I ask that everybody who's new to the Poverty and Homelessness Board check it out, because it's what we've been working on. And if you need copies or would like copies, I'd be happy to send it to you.
On the Lane County website.
It should be actually at the end of the meeting packet, which I also have. Pardon the scrolling. Here we go. Maybe? No. Also wrong attachment. Okay. Which means I think you didn't get the changes in your board packet. Let me, well, I don't have it right in front of me. My apologies. I will summarize what the two changes were. One change is to allow a subcommittee chairperson to be someone who is not a full member of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Currently, the chairs of the subcommittees need to be PHB members. And in some cases, that doesn't quite work out. It's also quite a lot. It's a large commitment because our subcommittees do a lot of work to be on the PHB and a chair of a subcommittee. So that would open up our options for chairs. And in particular, the Shelter Stakeholder Committee currently has a chair who's not a full member. So that's actually not in accordance with our governance charter. And then the other proposed change is to clarify proxy voting or replacements, which is something that we've started to do with Commissioner Trieger being a replacement or a proxy voter for Pat Farr, as well as Councillor Rodley for Mayor Van Gordon. So this would just allow that and allow them to vote and say when they can vote in place of the other member.
Thank you, Alex. I understand that part of the confusion came from just us being able to tell the difference between a work group and a committee. And I believe in one of our subcommittees, we even discussed this, and it seemed like at the time that there had been a seen workaround inside our existing charter or bylaws to do this. And that's how we wound up with some nominations for folks who were not board members of the PHB on the Shelter Stakeholders Committee for leadership. And so I feel like this is necessary in order to be able to preserve our pathway for representation and also bring in fresh voices who may be able to serve on that more dialed capacity. So I'm supportive of the changes as they were provided, and I'm open to having discussion if people here would like to either ask for clarification or seek modifications. Commissioners, Mayor, Councilor, anybody? Hearing none, can we entertain a motion to approve these recommendations and get a second?
Chair McAllister, I move to approve the recommendations of governance change.
And I second that.
Thank you, Commissioner and Mayor. If any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye or showing aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Alex, if you need any more from this group, please let us know. Thank you very much. So now we are at the part of the agenda where it's approximately 1 o'clock. It says agenda items from the members. Is there anything that the county, the city of Eugene, the city of Springfield, lived experience members want to discuss in this time? Commissioner Farr, I see your mic live. Is there something you'd like to say? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just inadvertently left it live, Chris. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. I would like to, through the lived experience seat, speak briefly to coordination of services. At some point in the shelter and healthcare committees, there will be a topic that is a known community need, and it is a known human need, but is not one that we are necessarily set up to navigate easily. We know that people die, we know that people get sick, and we know that homeless people get sick and die, but we don't have any options for people who are homeless and are hospicing. People who know that they have a fatal designation and they need to do what they can to be able to have quality of life. And so whereas we have respites and we have long-term, we don't have permanent supportive shelter for people who are not here permanently. So when we are trying to organize care, we are trying to navigate multiple systems, and we are trying to find safe places for people to be who are currently sitting in tents waiting for a placement, waiting for Medicaid to come through, waiting for an assignment, and waiting for a place where the caregivers and nurses are safe to come do their work, their hard, supportive work. And so at some point, I would like to bring to the bigger body a conversation on palliative care, hospice care, and long-term medical and mental health care for those of us who are waiting for the next PSH, who are waiting for the next transitional housing, or for those who have vouchers but no place to get. Because one of the saddest things to see is someone who is in their end of life having a voucher but not being able to follow that through. So if there's any concerns about this topic going forward to the greater committee, having a panel discussion, I'd like to have that conversation here. Or if there's any ideas about who might be on that panel or any recommendations, I was open to hearing that before I made a request of our healthcare committee. Commissioner Farr.
Chris, you and I have talked about it, and I'm fully supportive of it. This may be such a panel may be one that would welcome the expertise of an outside member, also somebody who actually is deeply involved in hospice or that type of care, to provide some more expert. But let's go with it. I mean, I'm on board completely, Chris.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor.
Yeah, I'm on board with it also, and I noticed that Dan Bryant has in the chat a comment that Community First in Austin does palliative care. So that might be a resource that we could look to. But I agree with Commissioner Farr as well that just even having someone from hospice talk to us about it could be helpful. And maybe there's it seems it's a kind of heartbreaking it's a sort of heartbreaking gap in our system. So I'm glad you're bringing it forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Counselor.
I just want to echo a little bit what Mayor Vin has said, that I appreciate, Chris, that you are bringing this to the forefront in terms of being a gap in care for those who are unhoused. And I'm also just supportive of digging into seeing what the possibilities are.
Thank you, Counselor. I actually spoke with one of our local administrators in one of the hospice groups, and they have done hospice care for people in tents in another state. And so there's several models, such as what Mr. Dan Bryant had brought up in chat, as well as other community partners. We have Peace Health, who is a member of our discharge planning and coordination action teams. We have people who have been in this community for a long time and help people both on the advocacy side of things as well as on the on service delivery. Mr. Manila.
Oh, I just wondered, given what you just said about someone doing this for people in tents and other communities, it would be helpful to know if there are any things that restrict this in statute in the state of Oregon. There's currently a bill relating to statewide reporting of homeless deaths. And, if there's a need to fix something, that might be a reasonable relating clause if there's something that is getting in the way of that, even though we would want that service to be provided probably in a better environment than a tent. But anyhow, that was my thought.
Thank you, sir. These are tough things. We know that even when we have people who are doing chemo from the street, we know that this is something that we are trying to. And when we have sites, we don't have supports. When we have supports, we don't have operations. When we have operations, we don't have sites. So this is a circle that we have as a community have to cover. When we know that the housed community needs a birthing center or a palliative care center, we are able to make it happen as a community. I hope that we can, through our articulation and through our data, and help promote the fact that people fall out of housing for multiple reasons, whether it's a wildfire, COVID, or just life. And we need to be there for them when they're needing something. And so this is something I feel strongly about, and I look forward to having this discussion. And I appreciate all the comments that have been shared so far. Any other agenda items? Do we have any thoughts, any updates from each of the local jurisdictions? Yes, sir. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair McAllister. I just wanted to mention from the Shelter Stakeholder Committee, the chair of that committee, as mentioned earlier, is not a member of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Kirsten London doing a superb job. Kirsten has recently become as on the call earlier, she has become a director of a local nonprofit, and her workload has intensified a little bit there. And she has been suggesting perhaps that there be a co-chair personship of that committee. And I believe that at the next committee the Shelter Stakeholder meeting, just for advance notice, there's probably going to be a discussion regarding a co-chairship. And there's already a potential co-chair who was actually one of the finalists that Dan Bryant is on this call right now. So I think the next Shelter Stakeholder Committee, there'll be a discussion regarding co-chairpersonship of that committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. How are the, just for the sake of the communication, how are efforts being received in each of the local jurisdictions? I know that there's camps going places. I know that there's funds coming. Do people feel like the voices are coming to the table? Do we feel like we need to be asking the state for more? Do we need to make a request of another committee to maybe get us some data or some recommendations to help your jurisdiction solve these problems? We have a lot of information and data in all these subcommittees, as has been pointed out and referenced by multiple people here today. How do we utilize that brain trust so that our community can gain trust? Mayor Venice?
You know, I have a question about this and not an answer. So, and I don't want to put Spry on the spot. I don't know if she's still in this meeting or not. We had talked many months ago about our kind of survey of providers, making sure that we are really talking to providers about what their capacity is and how they would like to increase their capacity and what they bring as a solution. And this body really could be a very good forum for that. And I know, you know, Sarai had talked many months ago about doing a survey of the providers. We've learned a lot. And it seems to me in the last 6 months, we have even more providers. We have so many kind of new grassroots organizations that have sprung up to work on homelessness. And so I'm just putting it out there that we could be a pretty powerful, maybe we need to designate or think about how we could create a forum where those providers speak to themselves. We're not speaking to them, they're speaking to us about their capacity, their skill set, what we need to advocate for at the legislature in terms of funding or with HUD in terms of funding in order to build capacity. I feel as if that's at least, I mean, I don't have that information, and it could be that folks at the county are more aware of it, but I feel as if it feels to me that we bumped up against that in the city, that, you know, where we're trying to do better. We need to, you know, fully coordinate with our providers.
So I can speak to this. You know, we launched a provider forum. We had a provider forum for a number of years in this community, and that was self-governed. It received staff support from our office for minute taking, and then regularly we would be on the agenda to make report on issues from local government. We have been staffing a provider forum, and this last month, the topics were around workforce, human resources, and we had our workforce manager who works with workforce services, and folks were able to connect around the services that are available to assist them with recruitment, retention, hiring, those kinds of things, and begin to develop some ideas in that area. And we also had a work session on Medicaid funding. And anyhow, those have been going well. What they haven't done yet is we haven't done what we did in previous years with our Community Action Advisory Committee, where we actually had time on the agenda for the provider forum, and then, you know, they would come either monthly or quarterly, and their leadership would present issues of concern or information to us for consideration. So I think that would be a useful thing.
Thank you, Steve.
That at the Human Services Commission meeting on Monday, we had a provider forum of sorts where providers were asked a series of questions that Alex Breyer wrote. Alex wasn't there. We got a really good set of input from 5 different providers, and I think Malaya Myers is on this call from Looking Glass and maybe some other providers. But it really was valuable information that when providers speak with the same voice, it's hard to not listen.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Mayor Venice, for your thoughts on this topic. Is there any business from the staff that we would like to have addressed in this time before I open it up for public comment?
I have one item that I just want to make sure I get on the record today that, and I think Chris touched on this a little bit. We need to come back to this group in relationship to establishing a coordinated entry work group. And this has to do with the larger issue of coordination that Mayor Venice was talking about earlier. You know, there are some policy issues that, like we do with our homeless management information system, that we really need this group's input and to hear from providers and get approval on. So I just wanted to put that out there as a future agenda item.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. At this time, I will ask anybody who would like to speak in public comment to please signify by announcing in the chat that you are and both where you are and that you'd like to speak. And we'll go into public comment. After speakers, there has been one written item that I will either forward on if we have time or read to the group. And I have Heather Saliki interested in speaking. Heather, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for all of the tremendous work that you all are doing in improving our whole system. On the ground, I'm starting to see it in the way the city of Eugene has begun communicating with one another internally and breaking down the silos between departments and in their improved communications with providers and advocates. I'm seeing it in the county with they're stepping up to staff critical positions. I'm seeing it with our legislators in clearly being more informed on the challenges and nuances of our housing and homelessness crisis. And I hear all the time in the voices of providers who recognize we can't do it alone, and we need to work together. I'd love to see this provider forum that you mentioned advertised more broadly and notes shared. I know I've tried to put something like that together, but with minute taking and facilitating and all that, it's overwhelming for one person. I urge this board to continue the hard work of bringing community together, to continue listening to providers and advocates and neighbors, and to the folks living unhoused, and keeping it real and honest so expectations are understood. I love hearing the conversation here, turning to communicating the work of the PHB and leveraging existing efforts. I think it's easy to turn against one another when our work is not visible. We all want to make a difference and connect on our common interests and concerns. I know there's more work to do than we can ever accomplish in our lifetimes, but I'm feeling confident that we are building the bridges that will sustain progress long term. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I also want to thank you for your testimony today regarding the sweeps bill, so to speak, that came before the Housing Committee. Yours and Mackenzie's testimonies really speak to the work that these organizations are doing while waiting for the world to catch up. So thank you again for those comments. Is there anybody else in the public who would like to speak? Not seeing any. I'd like to share real quickly some comments from a community provider. Point of disclosure, I work with the speaker, the writer rather, Arwen lost to Spain. And she just wanted to share, knowing that there was talk about the strategic plan, that as community providers of service to low income and unhoused people, I'd like to request the following considerations in strategic planning for the Lane County Poverty and Homelessness Board. It goes without saying that we need more variety and abundance of emergency, transitional, and entry-level housing options, including non-traditional settings, alternative dwellings, and sanctioned spaces for people to park or camp with basic facilities for hygiene, trash disposal, and access to electricity. We need to create coordinated entry system that is coordinated, specifically that prioritizes the consumer's unique circumstances, goals, and preferences, and matches those to available options, including facilitation and collaboration between providers to more efficiently and effectively utilize our resources. We need stronger advocacy at the state and federal levels for funding that supports organizational operation of programs that help people stabilize and maintain housing once it's obtained. It is not enough to build units. People need supportive services to achieve stability, work on goals, and contribute to society. We need city and county governments to streamline communication and contracting processes so that smaller nonprofits can more readily access funding for the important work that they do for our communities. Thank you for your time and efforts. Arwen Mas de Spain, LMFT, Executive Co-Director of Carry It Forward and Clinical Supervisor for the PAIR Program, OSLC. So with that in mind, we have a lot of continuing threads. We hear that we need to coordinate, we need to support local options, and we need to recognize what people are doing. We are recognizing that the governments and the agencies are doing what they can with what they got, but we need to continue the collaboration and the concerted efforts. If anybody else got different feelings or themes, here's an opportunity to share that. And if there's anybody that'd like to give a remonstrance, feel free to do so. Hearing none, I'd like to move to staff to please let us know if there's any assignments or homework or other agenda items that we should be considering at the next general meeting or the next executive meeting.
General things I have are coordinated entry policy review, hospice discussion, and membership of CCO members, as well as the system performance measures.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Alex. Madam Mayor.
I just wonder if you could add to that list, maybe not necessarily for the next meeting, but soon, to have this conversation about the provider forum and whether there's a way of that more robust, or at least a report to us about it, because it was, I wasn't really familiar with it, so.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to mention that I think that James Ewell is still on the call. We have a neighborhood outreach that's occurring this weekend regarding the moving of a non-sanctioned camp into a site for a sanctioned camp. And I'd like to hear about the neighborhood outreach, how that goes. And, you know, in general, it's something we've got to get much better at and much more consistent at. It's reaching to neighborhoods before people begin camping in their neighborhood. This is an opportunity to do so. And if James is on the line, he could maybe give a line or two about what is happening.
Hi there. Yeah, it's a little to be determined as far as the outreach. I've been working with Dwight from the River Road Neighborhood Association, and he has been excellent in getting some volunteers from that group together to go out this weekend and do the community engagement with neighbors. You know, that the goal is to move that camp to the Northwest Expressway River Road intersection and be able to provide them with the supports that the Beltline site we were unable to provide due to the location there and the inability to get vehicles, you know, to provide sanitation to that site. So I will have a clearer picture, I think, after this weekend, after we're able to do the community neighborhood outreach. But you know, it has been a pleasure working with Dwight, and I know that they are really eager to help in any way that they can. So it's been a really overall positive experience.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, James.
There are two other items for the next meeting, which would be program standards and case management standards, policy discussion and approval, as well as the charter, shelter stakeholder committee charter and membership list.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mrs. Borda, for also sending me a reminder for that one. I wanted to make sure we get it on the agenda. I do want to share that Mr. Paul Solomon of Sponsors has reached out and requested about 15 minutes in one of our next meetings to be able to discuss a program that they're working on. That is a federal program. And I said that I will put it before our our agenda team and see when we could do it. So he was hoping to have 15 to 20 minutes of robust conversation regarding these types of projects. So I just wanted to put that on our scope. We also like to at some point get a follow-up. How are we doing on our fire response for our displaced peoples? This type of data will help us inform what we do with our space and how we utilize shared resources across the whole entire county. If there's not any other items that we would like to see in the next couple months, please know that there was also requested panel discussions that will start to form and just lay out so we can, again, better educate, better inform, and better collaborate. So I appreciate all of you. We're moving. It's not as fast as any of us want. It's not as fast as any of our neighbors want, but we're all in this together. And as long as we remember that we are all human, and that we all have needs, and everybody deserves the right to dignity, then we can keep going. So thank you very much. I call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Chris, for your leadership.